Hey guys, my name is Tiffany. This is the first vlog I have ever done, so excuse me if it's a little rough. So, I've been wanting to do a book vlog basically, and I kind of wanted to do it themed, and I want to do it vampire themed, especially with the new Twilight book coming out, that the Beautiful People book that came out like earlier this year. Seems like vampires are kind of breathing back some life, and I used to love vampire books. I never grew out of it, I just stopped picking them up. So instead of doing these back to back to back, I'm hoping this vlog takes over a month. I will be reading other books outside of these vampire books, but this vlog is primarily for the vampire books I'm going to be reading. And I may mention a book here and there that's not one of these books, but it's not gonna be, very prominent. So I decided to reread New Moon, mostly because I still own the Twilight books. I really have no interest in Midnight Sun, but I reread the first Twilight book last year and it was okay. But New Moon was always my favorite out of the 4 books, so we're gonna go that route, and I'm probably gonna pick it first because it's a reread. I got The Beautiful from the library. I know nothing about it except for vampires. That's all I know. So these next 2 books were a little bit of a fail. One of them's my fault. One of them is just, with the thing that's going on right now, I've had a couple of issues with some classic books that had the same title as maybe like retelling. Yeah, retelling's the word. And, they also have different editions. They got abridged, they got illustrated. And I wanted to get the original Dracula, and they gave me the illustrated version. The normal Dracula is about 400 or 500 pages. This doesn't even reach 100. The illustrations are gorgeous. I decided just to get the audible edition of Dracula because it's a full cast. And I'm not going to bother the library and be like, hey, you gave me the different edition than what I wanted. And yeah, so I'm just going to be fine with that. And this other one was my fault. I've read the first 3 of the Vampire Chronicles, and I never finished it because for some reason when I was 14 I read this. I had the edition that had Interview with the Vampire Lestat, and Queen of the Damned all in one book. And I just thought it was a trilogy. I didn't realize there was like a million books. And I just typed in Lestat and got The Prince Lestat. And this is like the 11th book. And I didn't think about it until I realized, wait a minute. I just didn't realize it until I picked up the book. So I'm just going to get the audiobook for that too, because I like audiobooks anyways. I like to mix up the format. So I'm going to do 2 physical and 2 audiobooks. Okay, so I'm just 94 pages in of New Moon, and this was after like that Edward left her and it had like those basically blank chapters where it just had the month and then she wakes up. I actually do understand now that I'm older why Edward would possibly leave her. I just don't agree with the way he left her. Like, just basically being ruthless and saying I don't love you and then leaving her in the woods is not the way I personally would have gone about it. I know it's hard to get some people as stubborn as Bella to give you up, but I feel like maybe he should have just been honest and then just disappeared in the middle of the night or something and made sure she wasn't left in the woods. I do think it's concerning that they've been together a little under a year and she's gone that many months of basically not doing anything. I have been heartbroken, and I know that's rough. I know that can cause great depression, but her to basically just shut down to that extreme is a little concerning, and there's nothing wrong if you do. I just wish this would promote maybe her actually getting some help to learn how to cope with it versus just like being there. But I've also read the rest of the book, so that's why I'm saying it like this. This is the first time me reading it. I would like want to see her get some help. So I do not think there's anything wrong with being an adrenaline junkie. I don't think there's nothing wrong with taking risks if you understand those risks and try to minimize those risks. Like bungee jumping, motorcycles, I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't like how her coping mechanism is literally putting herself in danger just to hallucinate Edward's voice. But I really wish this book, instead of romanticizing it, would really just see some way to get her some help or recognize it is unhealthy. You know, like that's just, I don't know. It feels too romanticized in this versus, and there's nothing wrong with the other stuff, but the reason why she's doing it is the problem. And I know Jacob doesn't realize that's why she's interested in this stuff, and he would probably try to get her some help if he knew. It just kind of makes me feel sad, and not in a way of, oh, she loves him so much. It's just like, I wish there was a way for her to learn how to cope with everything, because it makes you wonder, what if something really tragic happened in her life? She may not be able to handle it, and a lot of us handle things badly, and we gotta learn how to handle it, and her doing this on her own just makes me kind of sad. Okay, this is one chapter later, but I see this quote quote double date, not a date thing with Mike, Jacob, and Bella is kind of a foreshadowing of the Jacob, Edward, and Bella situation. This is nowhere near as bad or as extreme of a love triangle, but I feel like this is just a little, sprinkle of foreshadowing. Okay, so I am 278 pages in, chapter 12. I have the edition that has the first chapter of Eclipse, so if my edition looks a little thicker, that's why. I will say one thing about Twilight, it is a very fast read, it's a simple read. I think the font is a good size. I don't need large font, but I do appreciate when font's not microscopic. It just kind of, it's a little painful to read when it's like super tiny and the margins are good. So I will give it that. It's very simple to read. I could read more, but season 2 of Umbrella Academy is out and I want to watch that. So I will read more of this later. I'm pretty sure I can finish all of this tomorrow if I really want to. Hey, it is day 2 of reading New Moon. I'm on chapter 16 now, so just 4 chapters. I'm kind of like, I know that sometimes you don't instantly get over your ex, and sometimes people move on to a new person before they're fully over it, and I don't necessarily think that's the worst thing in the world, especially since Jacob seems to be aware that she still has a touchy spot for Edward. But I don't like her mindset of basically just settling for Jacob, and that's what I'm feeling like. She may have a light feelings for him or whatnot, but I don't think they're genuine. I think she's just like, oh, this is a person who gives me attention when I want. I think can make it work, so I'm just gonna settle for him. And if she actually felt like organically liked him, then maybe I could get down with it. But I don't think this is like the right way to go about it. So I've tried to record this like 5 times, but this little baby wants to not stop crying, so I picked him up. So anyways, I have finished New Moon. I guess I'll put him down now. But I finished New Moon, and it is significantly better than Twilight. I don't get why people hate this one so much unless they just love Edward so strongly. But I think of this book from memory. I have not... Okay, so I don't get the full hate of New Moon unless you're just a huge fan of Edward. But from memory, because I have not reread Eclipse or Breaking Dawn, like I've only read them once, and this was years ago. This one seems like it's the least toxic book. Yeah, I have mentioned some stuff that are toxic with Bella's mindset, especially how she's just willing to settle, and she's just too easily become dependent on whoever she can become dependent on, and there's a lot that I could dissect through that. But this one feels like the least toxic, at least from my memory. And they do mention Romeo and Juliet a few times through the book, and now I finally get the references. I don't think I've noticed this before, but it has been years. Basically, Edward thinks Bella died, kind of like how Romeo thinks Juliet died. They're in Italy, and he attempts to commit suicide, and unlike Romeo, it doesn't work. But they wanted to play with that a little bit, and I do appreciate that Stephanie Meyer took them to Italy to make that correlation and that little hint towards Romeo and Juliet. It's not my favorite Shakespeare. I don't really like Romeo and Juliet, but I do appreciate that. That shows a little effort, I don't know if I'm going to reread Eclipse. New Moon was fine, but it was my favorite out of the four, and I remember Eclipse being my least favorite, but that could obviously change. I liked the first Twilight book more the first time I read it than I did last year, so I don't know. I am going to read Dracula next, and I said I was going to do that on audiobook. Would have started this book instantly, but I needed to finish Mr. Mercedes for a Stephen King book club that I'm in, and I also wanted to finish Yellowbird, which is a book about a Native American woman going through crimes and trying to figure out why somebody was missing off a reservation. So both books were good. So yeah, I'm not going to talk about them heavily, but that's why some dates have passed. So I was listening to it while doing stuff, and I thought it was interesting that Dracula could control the wolves. I am familiar with a lot of Dracula stuff, but I've never read the original Dracula, and I hadn't watched too many Dracula movies. But, I get the vampire tropes and things of that nature. And I knew there were journal entries, and the vibe is similar to Frankenstein, but I've never heard of vampires being able to control wolves. So I thought that was a very interesting twist on that, which this is the book that kind of made all the vampire tropes, so I guess it's not a twist, but he's not the one who invented vampires either. Okay, so I know this is just like the next chapter in, but I thought it was interesting that in chapter 2 we're already seeing the vampire stuff. Like, if I got attacked for nicking myself while shaving, and the crucifix cross necklace is the only thing to save me, and that person had no reflection, I would be terrified too. Like, I just would. Sorry, like, all of this is just like me sitting here. My internet is acting up, and so I want to listen to the book, but since I don't have the physical book, I'm just laying here listening to it. And I thought it was a huge mood shift going to like Mina's letters and whoever that other girl was, I can't think of her name. But I knew there was like journal entries and different points of view, but it definitely felt like a huge mood shift, but I don't hate it. And I thought it was interesting about the guy who wanted to be like the spider to the bird to the cat, etc., like that whole thing. And he's like in an insane asylum. I don't know if I could take that guy seriously, but back then, they didn't know much. And like, okay, so I know we talked about, they didn't know much back then. Well, I got to the either bleeding, bloodletting, trying to bleed out the vampire curse scene. And I actually watched the Van Helsing movie recently, so I think it's interesting to see him in this. I didn't realize Van Helsing was in Dracula. I know Dracula was in the movie, but he's like the OG vampire, so I think it was interesting to see him in this. And I think it's interesting we're seeing the transformation of Mina right now. I think it's Mina. Yeah, Mina. But I am done listening for the day. I am going to probably clean and wash things, but I am enjoying this so far. I'm probably about 30% through. I'm not listening at exactly 1 point speed. And I thought about listening while I clean, but with classics, I like to actually sit there and pay attention. Unless they're like, modern classics. But classics this old, I do understand them. But I don't understand them well enough to be doing 15 million things while I'm listening to them, Hey guys, new day. So I listened to Dracula and I've listened to all that I'm going to listen to for now. I just got a few notes that I kind of want to talk about. I thought the meeting between the four guys talking about Dracula's power and the fact that he can change forms of travel, which I knew the bat thing. Like, I knew he could go into a bat. I think the fact that he can vanish and basically teleport's interesting. I also thought his weakness with running water was something I didn't expect or ever thought of. If that's ever been in any type of vampire thing, I just didn't notice. But I don't think that is something brought up a lot, or at least not from the vampire books I've read or the movies I've seen. But that was something like, I don't know why water would be a thing to keep the vampire out. I knew that vampires had to be invited in. Like, I knew they can't just walk over your threshold, but the running water was definitely something I did not expect. I also felt incredibly uncomfortable with the Mina scene of him just coming in and making her drink his blood and trying to progress her transition. And I know it's supposed to make you uncomfortable, but it definitely worked. Okay, so I finished Dracula, the final showdown, all that stuff. I know they said all Catholic things like crucifixes, holy water, and all that stuff would be effective against Dracula, but the fact that they used communion wafers against him and that was effective is really hard for me to imagine actually working, because communion wafers, I'm not Catholic, but you eat those, right? Like, to me, that's just kind of hard to, like, I guess probably they're blessed or something versus a regular cracker, but it's still weird to me. Overall, 5 out of 5. I truly enjoy this. I like that they kept the vampire an actual monster instead of being this seductive mystery that can kind of be good. Because, and I think there's times and places for that. Like, I like how Anne Rice does it. Like, they're monsters and they're seductive. But this book actually kept Dracula as a monster. There wasn't a lot of Dracula in it. And it kind of kept it a mystery. And I appreciate that too. So, yeah, I liked it. And something else I want to talk about. This. So I've read about 150 pages of this, and I know this is supposed to be vampire based. I like the New Orleans vibe, but I kind of thought this was more vampiric. I don't know if the vampire comes up later, but so far I haven't got much vampire out of this. And the writing's okay. Like, the writing is pretty. And I like historical settings, I like historical fiction, but I'm ready for the monsters. And I know they're kind of alluded, but I want a vampire. This book's only like 400 pages long, so maybe it comes up later. I'm at 180 pages, there we go. Yeah, I'm 180 pages in, not 150, but I haven't got that much into it. I thought of the French was interesting. I did take French in high school and college, but I think the French in this book is relatively easy enough to understand if you didn't, like, just with the context, and it's very basic. And I thought the Scottish accent was interesting. Like, I understood it, but it was definitely heavy. It's something that I want to hear to see if it sounds legitimate, but I'm not an expert. Hey guys, so it's been a second since I've recorded. I've dyed my hair, obviously. From what I can see in my phone, it doesn't show how purple this is. This is a dark purple, and this looks more red in the phone than orange. I don't know how it'll look on the computer, but the initial color it's supposed to be is purple and orange, so I DNF'd the beautiful. The writing was good. I normally do like historical settings, but I feel misled in the advertisement and the hype of the book. I thought there'd be more vampires like now, and I know it's supposed to be a series, so maybe the vampires will come up later, but I feel really misled, and it kind of put me in a slump. So it took me a second to start Lestat, and I listened to it very fast once I started it, but I really just wanted a whole different vibe that's not supposed to be vampires or whatever, so I read a couple of books in between. Like I said, it wasn't the worst book. I just felt misled, and it's not for me. Maybe I'll read it in the future when my expectations are better. But yeah, so I forgot to vlog me listening to The Vampire Lestat. I almost said The Prince Lestat, which is another book in the series. But Lestat, there wasn't a lot to talk about, and I just kind of forgot to vlog, to be honest. Like, I just did. Because it was an audiobook. I was cleaning or doing grocery shopping or something, you know, when I was listening to it. And it's kind of just a link book. I think this book was written a few years after Interview with the Vampire. I think the Interview with the Vampire is supposed to be a one-shot book, but then it became a series. I could be making that up. I could be. I did not research before this, but I think I've read that before. And it's just kind of a link book. You do get the background of Lestat and how he became a vampire and how he knows the vampires in Paris. One thing I really do like is, you know, vampires are supposed to be immortal. So people you know are going to die, but I'm guessing most vampires break ties with people they know. Well, Lestat did not with his mother, and his mother dying made his immortality kind of go into more perspective because he loved his mother so much and he was still in her life. And I thought that was rather interesting. And, you know, he does see the book Interview with the Vampire, and he has feelings on what Louis said in it, and he wants to write another book, and he wants to, you know, and it sets up for Queen of the Damned with the music and all that. I think that was really interesting, and I like how they talked about Armand and all that, but it wasn't enough to just like talk about as you're reading. But yeah, I do like how they talked about Armand and all that stuff, but it wasn't really anything to like critique or talk about through the whole book, so it's just easier to do it on its own. So even if I remembered to vlog, I probably wouldn't have had much to say except for, hey, I am so much percent through, blah, blah, blah. And I do think it's an essential book if you care about characterization and you just want to know the setups behind everything. But I can kind of see why they didn't make the second book into the second movie. From what I remember, there are stuff from The Vampire Lestat that got thrown into the movie, but not heavily. It's mostly off the book Queen of the Damned. But I definitely see why, like, it got skipped. And you know, that's like I said, it's not because it's a bad book, but there's just some stuff that, like, it wouldn't have been as action-packed, you know, and it's... So my Stephen King book club picked Salem's Lot as the September and October book. The way this works is we pick 2 books and it's a book for each month, but because of the health issue going on in the world, sometimes you can't get books instantly. So ever since that started up in about March, we have been doing 2 books at a time, and we have a separate chat for each one. Whichever one you get first, you just talk about that first, as long as it's between one of the 2. And if you're behind, we're really chill. We'll still talk about books that were a few months ago, but most people are on track. And Salem's Lot's one of them, and that's a vampire book too. I am still on hold at the library for it, and I wanted this to be a month-long thing, so it's not going to be here, but I do want to mention that. And I'd like to mention I will be reading Queen of the Damned. I actually own the audiobook, but I'm not ready to read it right this second. I have a lot of stuff on Libby I need to read, and I kind of went a little crazy on the graphic novels and the manga from the library, so I own Queen of the Damned, so it's going to get kind of put down a little bit, and I don't usually read series back to back anyway, so it is what it is. I may talk about Salem's Lot in the future, but it won't be here. But I just wanted to mention the 2 other vampire books that are on my TBR for the near one of them's near, one of them's near-ish future. So guys, I hope you like this. Let me know in the comment section below what vampire books you really loved. And yeah, I'll see you next time.